Well, the Trump administration and its critics are still arguing over whether details about strikes against Yemen's Houthi rebels in a group chat were classified. The series of texts on the messaging app Signal were inadvertently sent to a senior magazine editor. But what do those leaks tell us about America's campaign against the Houthis, and what does this so-called Signalgate saga mean for Yemen? Sarah Phillips is a professor of global conflict and development at the University of Sydney and author of Yemen and the Politics of Permanent Crisis. She says the leaks have given the Houthis an idea of Washington's priorities in the region.
I think that they will have taken a couple of key details out of it. The first one is that Vance first says that the strongest reason to do anything is to send a message. And then Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, said, this is not about the Houthis. And then he talks about this being about restoring freedom of navigation. Now, I suspect that that is going to be quite comforting to the Houthis, because it suggests that the US administration doesn't have an intention, at least at the moment, to bring in or to support ground troops. So the Houthis are really concerned that they could face a ground assault from a coalition of local Yemeni forces that would be backed up by air support, whether by Saudi Arabia or the UAE or both. But they would be relying on US support in order to do that. Now, this has happened before, and it's kept the Houthis out of the strategic province of Marib, which is very wealthy in oil and which the Houthis really, really want to get hold of. So I suspect that they're going to take a modicum of comfort from that, that it's a fairly clear signal that that's not where the administration is thinking, at least at the moment.
Does that comfort mean that the Houthis may have an advantage in some way, in particular their ongoing campaigns to attack ships in the Red Sea heading towards the Suez Canal?
It's quite possible, because the Houthis, that's a pretty low-cost option for them to do these kinds of attacks in the Red Sea. They have the sorts of weapons that can make these attacks reasonably effective and not cost them too much. The other detail, though, that I suspect they're really looking at is when Waltz said that they had multiple positive IDs of one of the targets, meaning that they had presumably sources on the ground, or a source on the ground who was able to provide a positive identification of one of the targets. Now, that's going to be very interesting to the Houthis. I'm sure they probably suspected it, but having that aired publicly, and now everybody knows, that gives them plausibly an excuse to really ramp up these detentions that they've been doing against any independent voices. They've been doing a campaign, basically a dragnet campaign, of rounding people up and forcibly disappearing them who they believe could pose a threat. This has been people like academics, civil society actors, members of minority groups. And so now this very clear confirmation that there were sources will be quite welcome to the Houthis, I would think, because they can say, look, it's there in black and white. And that's really concerning.
And how might that affect, Yemenis in general, because it is still an epicenter of one of the world's worst humanitarian crises?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, Yemenis have been through just an extraordinary amount. And the idea that there may be a great deal more to come is it's just horrifying. Not only do they have to withstand the military assaults of various external parties, but also the Houthis. And if the Houthis are feeling like either their backs are to the wall and they need to act quickly, or that they've got a measure of latitude, both are really terrible outcomes for Yemeni civilians.
Now, this comes in the broader context of the war in Gaza, isn't it? I mean, so did the Houthis seize this deadly conflict more to gain more power in Yemen, or purely to respond to Israel's war in Gaza?
It's both. The Houthis are very long-standing supporters and allies of the Palestinian people. So to them, going and acting in this way was they could not have done anything else. This is very much where they are politically and ideologically. They are very much in support of the Palestinian people, as are the vast majority of Yemenis as well. So it's not like they're just putting this on or acting out of political opportunism, but there's an element of that as well. So the Houthis rather, had been facing the first serious protests against their rule a week or two before the Hamas attack in Israel. And they were very concerned about this. And so having the attack in Israel and the response from Israel really gave the Houthis the ability to say, look, we are the only force in the region that is prepared to really stand up for the Palestinian people. And that's very popular locally and regionally. Now, that doesn't mean that people in Yemen like them and like their rule, but they do give them credit for standing up in this way. And the Houthis have taken full credit and full advantage of this. And that's something that has also helped them to recruit more people. And that just helps to further entrench a movement that has brutalized its population.
And going back to those leaked text messages, how big an annoyance was this, particularly for U.S. allies in the region, and in particular Saudi Arabia, that has been fighting the Houthi rebels?
Yeah, I mean, the Saudis would not have been thrilled at all about this because, again, it signals to them that the US administration is not thinking of offering them strong support. The same with the United Arab Emirates. They'll be concerned about what kind of level of trust they can have in the US, as is just about every country in the world right now. So the GCC states, particularly the Saudis and the Emiratis that have been involved in the Yemeni war, will be no different.
What is your take on Iran's denial that it is arming the Houthis, particularly during the instability of the civil war that's happening there?
It's patently false. There's a great deal of arms coming in from Iran, but on the other hand, I think we need to be a little careful of assuming that the Houthis are just a puppet organization for the Iranians. That's not the case either. They are very, very strongly aligned in their geopolitical interests and in their ideology. So they've got a really strong mutual interest, which causes them to pretty much be on the same page about most things. But that said, the Houthis will do what the Houthis want to do locally. But the idea that the Iranians would deny that they are supporting Houthis is absurd. I mean, they've said publicly time and time again that they are. So the idea that they would try to claim otherwise is just not worth considering.
And Professor Phillips, what can you tell us about what's happening on the civil war front in Yemen? Give us a sense of who is in control and how much control do the Houthis and the government has.
So it's been in an awkward stalemate for a number of years now, and the Houthis have managed to maintain control over large portions of the north of the country. They probably control about roughly 70% of the population. And there's one city left in the north that is still, one large city in the north that is still under government control, and that's the city of Marib. And Marib has a lot of oil facilities, and the Houthis really want to gain control of Marib because if they do, a lot of their financial troubles at least improve substantially. It will help them to sustain themselves a lot more than they are able to now. Right now, they're really reliant on whatever is coming in from Iran, what they can coerce out of the population, and their ability to redirect the aid that is coming into the northern parts of the country towards themselves and their political allies. So it's a tense stalemate, and this is going to likely shake things up. Not only the US strikes that have been ongoing, but how the members of the Houthis are reading into the transcript that's come out from the Trump administration.
Okay, Professor Sarah Phillips, really good to get your insights into this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much.